Welcome to the Alliance for Livable Ontario all-member election preparation meeting. I'm Franz Hartmann, the coordinator. For those of you who are new to the ALO, we are an alliance of over 1,000 people and over 200 groups, including farmers, housing activists, environmentalists, healthcare workers, community groups, laborers, developers, business people, and neighborhood associations representing hundreds of thousands of Ontarians from many different sectors. And we want to build a livable Ontario and stop the provincial government policies that falsely claim they will solve the housing issues facing us while harming our communities and undermining the protection of farmland, natural areas, and democratic institutions. If you want to learn more and become a member, please visit us at livableontario.ca, and I think Ian will have put our web link into the chat. Here's what we've got planned for the next hour or so. If I can get my mouse working. After land acknowledgement, we're going to start with a short review of our Five Ways Home campaign, followed by the Political Insiders panel that will explore what to expect in the upcoming provincial election likely to happen this spring. Then we'll take questions from you. And then I'm going to give you a sneak peek at what we have planned on in the coming months to get ready for the next election. And then we're going to have some feedback from you on our plans and end with next steps with a special request from Livable Ontario founder Ann Golden, just before we wrap up, hopefully around 8 o'clock in the evening. Those of you who are new to Zoom webinars, please use the chat function to share your thoughts with everyone. But if you want to pose a question to the panelists, please use the Q&A function. The Alliance for Livable Ontario recognizes that its work and the work of its members take place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. The ALO is honored to collaborate with Indigenous colleagues, right holders, and communities. Acknowledging traditional Indigenous territories is one way to recognize contemporary and historical Indigenous presence and land rights. It is a small step towards dismantling the continued impacts of colonialism and undoing Indigenous erasure in our everyday lives. Now let's learn a bit about all of you and who is joining us this evening. Ian Borsick, the Executive Director of Environment Hamilton, is also a member of the ALO Coordinating Committee and is helping us with Zoom logistics. So Ian, please put up the first poll. Okay, and you can see there, quite simple. Are you a member of the Alliance for Livable Ontario? Have you heard about the Five Ways Home campaign? And the last question is, have you visited the Five Ways Home website?
Are we supposed to fill these out?
It's for the others, Anne, but
because I can't. I'm trying to click yes, and I can't.
No worries.
Okay.
Just leave it for the other 71 people who are on this call to.
Okay, that's good.
And Ian, I'll let you decide when it's time to close the poll and to end it.
Almost at 90%. Let's see if we can get to there. I'll end it now.
Okay. So a lot of Alliance for Livable Ontario members here, and most of you have heard about the Five Ways Home campaign, and probably a bit more than half of you have actually gone to the website. So thank you for that. And we'll just share the results quickly. And okay. Now let's talk about the Five Ways Home campaign. In June, we launched the 5 Ways Home campaign. And essentially, the value statement in it is if we want to protect farmland and natural areas in the Greenbelt from costly, destructive suburban sprawl, we need to make sure the public is demanding the right actions from government. And if we want the next generation of Ontarios to have housing that is affordable and part of livable communities, we need to make sure that the public is demanding the right actions from government. So we found 5 actions that will do both. And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I want to show this short video.
You probably know someone who can't find a home they can afford. It wasn't always like this. And while we can argue and debate about what happened and didn't happen, talking won't make affordable homes happen. So a bunch of us got together and found 5 ways that will. Number 1, gutting farmland and nature to build McMansions in places where you need 2 cars and have to install expensive infrastructure is not the answer. We need to build in the right places, affordable, livable neighborhoods where people already live and want to live. And we already have enough ready-to-build room inside our towns and cities to do it. Number 2, while everyone needs something different and affordable, too many of these are being built. We need to build a wide variety of housing types: low-rise, mid-rise, not-for-profit, multi-unit, multi-family, multi-bedroom. A multiplex of more affordable, appropriate options for every stage of life. Number 3, the way most homes are built and the laws around building them are not built for affordability or speed. We need to build smarter and faster, like more wood frame and prefab panel homes, and updating old rules, like high-rises needing parking for everyone. We can cut costs and time with faster and smarter rules, approvals, and building methods. Number 4, for decades, our governments built and operated affordable, non-market housing. Then, affordable housing stopped going up, but rents didn't. We need to invest heavily in non-market affordable housing. And we is our governments. Builders will build it, co-ops and other groups will run it, but our governments must invest in it because almost no one else is. Number 5, we can't be hurrying like mad to approve and demolish and build without stopping to think about neighborhoods. We need to make housing not just affordable, but part of livable communities. Affordable means building in the right places, building smarter and faster, and building more choices and more non-market homes. While livable means building neighborhoods, close, convenient communities that bring everything we need together, including each other. These are our 5 ways to affordability. But there's actually one more. We need everyone, governments, the private sector, and nonprofit housing providers to work together to fix this. And we need you to tell your MPP that they've got 5 things to do to help everyone have an affordable, livable home now. Learn all that you can do at 5wayshome.ca.
So some of you have not been on the website yet. And so just let me take you, I just want to provide, I take you on a very quick tour of the 5 Ways Home website. When you show up on the homepage, you're going to see this, and you'll get a link to each of the 5 action areas. If you press one of those, you'll see this. You'll see a brief description, and you'll see a link to a 1-minute video. We've got 1-minute videos for each of the 5 action areas. Then we have a take action button and a read more on this topic button, which takes you to the details for each action. Then the take action page has 3 actions. Speak to your friends and family and neighbors about our 5 action areas, contact your elected officials, and share our videos and content on social media channels using the links. We have links to the full report You see the cover there on the right, and to each of the 5 action areas. Please share that with your friends and family if you haven't done so already. Use your social media links to get the information out there. Now let's turn to the provincial election. It's coming, very likely sooner than June 2026, the official date of the next provincial election. And I say that because that's the message Premier Ford has been signaling for at least the last few months. In June, it looked like the election might be called this fall. Then in early September, the Premier said it won't happen until next year. So now pundits are predicting spring of 2025. This will come at the heels of the American presidential election, which could fundamentally change politics across the globe. And it will likely come before a federal election unless opposition leader Pierre Poilievre gets his way. What will this mean for our efforts to solve the housing crisis and stop destruction of farmland, natural areas, wetlands, and the Greenbelt? Well, to discuss this, we've gathered 3 political insiders who have lots of experience in politics and a really good sense of what is happening at Queen's Park. Jane Fogel was first elected in 1997 as the local councillor for the town of Halton Hills, and now also serves as the regional councillor for Halton Hills Wards 3 and 4. Jane has been a long-time climate and anti-sprawl activist. Matthew Kelway is the Director of Nursing and Health Policy for the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, also known as the RNAO. He also represented Beaches East York as a Member of Parliament from 2011 to 2015. And Phil Pothen is Council and Ontario Environment Program Manager for Environmental Defence Canada. Phil is a land use planner and environmental lawyer with over a decade of experience in the building sector. I should also note, to be fully transparent, that all 3 of you are all members of the Alliance for Livable Ontario Coordinating Committee. Thanks so much for being here this evening. So let me start with a question before we get to the election. A very specific question. What issues are top of mind to you or your organization, and how do they connect to the work of the Alliance, including our focus on housing? And just order of people on my screen, we'll start with you, Matthew, then Jane, and then Phil.
Well, thanks, Franz. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. Well, let me start with a kind of obvious one, is the homelessness crisis. As someone who's done encampment support in Toronto for 4 years now, I know it's a burgeoning issue. And all of you on the line, I'm sure, whatever town or city you live in Ontario, are seeing the same thing. It's been recognized as a human right here in Canada and the Canadian Human Rights Code since '76, and federally since 2019 in the National Housing Strategy Act, and yet we don't even have a accurate account. The one that still has kind of policy currency of 235,000 homeless people experiencing homelessness a year across Canada is a 2014 figure. And yet it's such an important health issue. And the MAP Center for Urban Health Solutions recently came out with a study that said that on average, homelessness takes 17 years off your life. Toronto Public Health has come up with similar figures for men. Average life expectancy, median life expectancy is 54 versus 78 if you're homeless, versus part of the regular other population. For women, 48 versus 85. That's all controlling for substance use disorder, mental health issues. Along the way, if you're homeless, you've got lots of health issues. Hospital stays for people experiencing homelessness, twice as long on average. And often many of those days spent in hospital are what are called alternative levels of care days, where you ought not to be in hospital, but you have nowhere else to go. And about 17% of hospital beds across Canada are filled with ALC patients with nowhere else to go. And in part, that's because the other forms of care, such as supportive housing, are not available to people. Toronto alone has a waiting list of 27,000 for supportive housing, so that CAMH, for example, 20% of their patients are ALC patients, and on average, they spend 426 days under that status, i.e. waiting for somewhere else to go. It's the same with long-term care. And of course, long-term care rooms, beds count as housing stock. And on average, it takes 72 days to get out of a hospital into a nursing home bed. 45,000 people are on the waiting list for a nursing home bed in Ontario, and lots more going to be needed in the future. And we know that the nexus between housing and health gets a little more complicated when we start talking about core housing need, i.e. overcrowding, disrepair, affordability, but not much. There's a ton of research, and over again, we see the connection between housing and health. It's through poverty, food security, cost-related non-compliance with prescribed drugs. So housing is very clearly a social determinant of health, and that's what keeps us at RNAO around the table with ALO.
Thank you for that. Jane, what about you? What issues are top of mind to you, and how do they connect to the work that we're doing with the Alliance?
So I'm wearing two hats. So I am a counselor, but I am a member of the Halton Hills Climate Action. So a lot of my answers are going to be on the climate side, but not entirely. So if I talk about climate, our group is mostly concerned about driving down greenhouse gas emissions. Like that's the bottom line or the top line, however you want to look at it. So, but in order to address that, we've come through a period of the province making the municipalities expand their urban boundaries. And so we as a group really focused on stopping sprawl, and worked very hard to do that while we were in that planning phase. And we still want to stop sprawl. We also want to stop the expansion of gas into new subdivisions. And we want to stop new gas-fired power plants, which we've been successful at getting rid of one in Halton Hills that was proposed by Atura. We rallied the forces, so that was good. And we're also quite interested in the 413 and stopping it. It's another sprawl issue. Involving a lot of the same property owners, and so we're working on that. If I put on my counselor hat, I would say we're most concerned about the mess that's been made of planning in general, and would love to see we would like to see the growth plan back and the provincial planning statement back, because they've created so many problems for us. And not only that, all these changes have taken away a lot of the rights of the public to participate in planning. So there's a democracy element to this as well that we're all keeping in mind. But I would say, how does it line up with the housing project that the ALO has? When you stop sprawl, our group would welcome more neighbors. We would welcome, and we have gone out to support applications for gentle density coming into neighborhoods. And I think that's exactly what you're looking at. We're looking at transit supportive neighborhoods as well, because transit means lower greenhouse gases. And so if we can get that going, and as a counselor, I know we need those transit supportive densities to make transit affordable for the municipality, which then makes it desirable, because you can add the number of the frequency of trips and so on to make it more desirable. So to me, it all fits together. And so that's why, I'm a part of the ALO as well.
Thank you, Jane. Phil, what about you? What issues are top of mind to Environmental Defence Canada, and how do they connect to the work that the ALO is doing?
Well, frankly, the agenda they described for the ALO is completely identical to the mandate of my program at Environmental Defence. We are focused on the nexus between housing and land use planning laws and environmental justice issues, including human health and quality of life. And in particular, the central premise of my entire program, the reason I'm at environmental defense, is that sprawl, including both the persistently low density, low rise, use segregated state of Ontario's existing neighborhoods, but also the practice of putting new housing in greenfield development, even though existing neighborhoods haven't been densified yet. That's at the root of Ontario's biggest environmental justice problems. There is no way to save what remains of our most endangered species habitat, our last remaining Carolinian habitat, and what remains of our quality agricultural soils without preventing any expansion of sprawl beyond our pre-2022 settlement boundaries. But there's also, and this is key, there is no realistic path to meeting our climate obligations and preventing runaway climate change that doesn't involve quickly densifying almost all of our existing neighborhoods to at least 100 people per hectare in order to support all the amenities, including cost-effective, fast, and reliable public transit within easy walking distance, and shifting most private car trips towards walking and cycling or transit. And as for the ALO specifically, it provides a sort of behind-the-scenes back channel for the kind of frank tactical discussion and disciplining of message that is absolutely vital to having any success in defeating this government's initiatives. It's always been a feature of this government, it's this government's MO to design individual policy initiatives to try and pit folks who abstractly are opposed to its agenda against one another. And that's especially true on housing, but also to provoke people into saying and doing things that can be used to caricature the opposition. So they try to goad grassroots organizations into accepting the premise that more immigration and more housing output and population growth is at odds with protecting farmland and wildlife habitat, so that we retreat to ideas of balance and, well, yes, we need housing, but, or else degrowth arguments, which they know they can beat us on. But they also try to goad progressives into denying that there's a housing shortage at all, or that boosting the supply of housing is a necessary part of the solution. And throughout the big sprawl and the Greenbelt attacks, we had to kind of coordinate that messaging in a very awkward ad hoc way by public reports, by asking people to take down tweets, by phoning people. So it's good to have a behind-the-scenes clearinghouse where we can have those communications behind the scenes and explain why we're asking them to take down that tweet or not to say something that people might be inclined to do otherwise.
Okay, great, thank you. In short, we're all here because we know that if we deal with the housing crisis properly, we solve a whole bunch of other issues. If we don't deal with it properly, we exacerbate those issues. That's great. So as I said earlier, the election is officially scheduled for June 2026, but the Premier has been hinting that he's going to call it earlier. I'd like to hear from each of you because each of you has a slightly different perspective on where you are at. I'll start with you, Jane. What have you been here? What's your gut to tell you? You've been in politics for a long time. Why do you think Premier Ford is wanting to call the election?
Well, there were lots of
time.
I don't really know if he wants to call it early. He's musing out there. He's sort of throwing it out there to see what sticks on the wall. And, we've got the Liberal Party that's coming from the ground up right now. And the longer he waits, the stronger they will get. So, there's a good reason for sort of getting ahead of that. There's also the pending investigation into the Greenbelt scandal. When's that coming out? Maybe he wants to get ahead of that too. But I've just been thinking myself about who's behind Ford and all his decisions. And there's some very big backers there that have reaped a lot of benefits from being thrown like candy at the parade. Like, okay, we've got all these landowners that have gotten the rezoning. They're making billions of dollars. But what Ford has done is he's shown us that a new premier could do what he's done, and which is throw out all the rules, could undo anything that's been done before, no process. You know, they might feel a little vulnerable and want to know, how can they keep the party going longer? So is it better to have a quick election and that he would presumably win and then go out 2 more years? Or do you want to just ride it out and make sure you've got 2 years ahead of you and see what happens at that point? So like, there's reasons on both sides, and he's sitting out there wondering, well, what should he do? I don't know which way it's going to go.
Okay. Phil, what about you? What are your thoughts? Why do you think the premier may want to go early?
Well, I think it's actually pretty simple, and I'd want to do it if I were in his place as well. And that is, if you know you're going to fail the 5th grade, it's only common sense to ask your parents for the running shoes you want before the report card comes in. The provincial government has spent most of the past 6.5 years claiming that its deluge of sprawl MZOs, its strong arming of municipalities to expand the glut of green space already designated for development, its gutting of conservation authorities and wetland protections, its revival of zombie highways, and now its killing of settlement boundaries and removal of mandatory densification rules were somehow going to help produce more homes faster. That was their whole raison d'etre. Everything can be justified by getting more homes faster and maybe also, lessening gridlock. And we consistently told them, environmental defense specifically, but the experts, environmental movement more broadly, that their policies would do exactly the opposite, making it impossible to increase housing output fast enough to meet housing demand, let alone deliver, that it would result in fewer homes being built more slowly and more expensively. Because the only way to get more homes with our limited construction capacity is to do a lot less greenfield construction, low-rise rebuilds, renos. That's where we waste 75% of construction now, is on just rebuilding old homes as bigger homes. And we need to laser focus. The only way, we told them right from the start, was to laser focus on infill, mid-rise housing within existing neighborhoods. And we said that, they denied it. They said we were being extreme or reluctant. Well, the results are in, behind the scenes, they're trickling, and they're proving us right and proving the government wrong. 6.5 years in, we are building half as many homes each month as we need to keep the government's promise of 1.5 million homes by 2051. And it's not just that they're failing to increase output fast enough. Housing starts have been declining. And it's not that things just haven't had a chance to flow through the pipeline. It's not just housing starts, but building permit applications that are down from 2,482 in 2021 to 1,225 in 2023, on track to be even lower this year. So that means that it's a certainty that without a complete head transplant, a complete U-turn and reversal of this government's sprawl and highways policies, the expert and media are going to catch on within months. It's only a matter of months before it's this provincial government that gets the blame for young people not being able to find a home, for newcomers not being able to find a home that they can raise a family in. And they need an election before that happens. And so that's what it's coming. That's where all this is coming from.
Matthew, what about you? You've been involved in politics. What do you think is happening in the premier's head? Why do you think he wants to go early?
Yeah, can I just say RNAO is a nonpartisan organization, and so my comments are more of a formal and informal student of politics over the years. But when there was speculation of a fall election, that made sense to me. When that hasn't transpired, I think something else is going on here. I'm not convinced we're headed for an early election. I think what's happening is we're in the early stages of a process that needs to work its way through. The process is largely circumstantial. I think the main circumstance is that we've got a Liberal Party that isn't recognized as a party in the legislature. They got a new leader. And I think the pushes and pulls, including the musings about an early election, are really about trying to get the Liberals to show their hand on what they're going to do. Are they running left? Are they running right? How are they handling this? So I think that's the stage we're in. I think, and then this isn't exclusive of the first thing. I think there could be something else going on here, which is the kind of extreme policy prescriptions that he's throwing out lately about bike lanes in Toronto, about digging tunnels under the 401, about closing supervised consumption sites. I think he may be trying to take away the ground for traditional brokerage politics for the Liberal Party. And we see that in other provinces across the country, right? We've seen Alberta go to a two-party system. We've just seen BC kind of head that way. And so I think that maybe if he's thinking big picture, these games going on now, both the musings and the policy stuff, is about taking the grounds out from traditional Ontario brokerage party system.
Okay, thank you. We've got one more question to our panelists, and then we're going to hand it over to you. If you have a question for the panelists, please use the Q&A function to put your question in there. I'm not sure how many we're going to be able to get through because we are trying to get everybody out of here by 8 o'clock. Final question to the panelists then. Each of you has access to powerful networks of insiders and sometimes even polling data. That gives you a unique insight into what opinion makers and what the public is thinking. What issues do you think will be top of mind in the upcoming provincial election, and why? And this time we'll start with Phil. What do you think is going to be top of mind and why? And I'm going to ask all my panelists to keep it brief so we have time for the audience to ask their questions.
I think you won't be surprised to hear, but broadly speaking, housing, but specifically the shortage and high price of family-sized and market homes in particular. And the reason for that is the shortage of truly affordable housing and non-market housing specifically has been a huge problem for a generation at least, right? We got out of the business of building non-market housing. We've been, gutting subsidies for housing for a very long time. But it hasn't been politically salient because the affluent and middle-class young people were still, and newcomers were still confident that they could, if they got a well-paying job, find an apartment or a home in some form, in some place that they'd be comfortable living with enough bedrooms to start a family. It might have to be an apartment. It might not be in the perfect spot, but that swing group that is not low income still felt like, okay, I'll find a home somewhere. That is just what's changed, is that both in truth and in perception, that's just no longer true. A middle class or upper middle class household cannot find, it's not just an affordable home in the sense of 30% of income, just a home that they could plausibly manage to scrounge together enough money to afford in the kind of neighborhood where they're comfortable living, and they overwhelmingly want to live in existing neighborhoods, and frankly in the GTA, existing parts of the GTA at all. And so that is causing, not in the the sectors maybe from a lot of folks have been angry about this for a long time, not just in folks who are concerned about homelessness, folks who have low or restricted income, but just the general population, younger folks especially. There is this huge rage that is showing up in the polls, and it is very specifically directed at any kind of policy that seems to put the aesthetic or lifestyle preferences of the older generation ahead of their just getting a home somewhere. And like anything that suggests that, we need to balance, our interests, as existing homeowners with younger generation, like that is going to be, the chum, the blood in the water for the next election. And so the government wanted to turn that against us. And that was their hope. And that's how they're getting, if you look at the federal level, polling shows, and we've done a lot of internal polling that we keep for government relations purposes, But you can see from public and release polling that we've looked into as well. I'm not like revealing anything here, that younger generation is now more inclined to vote for the Conservatives than older Ontarians, which I can't remember that's the last time that happened. Where it was the case in Ontario, it's less so lately, but at the federal level, it's very much true that the younger generation, 18 to 34, is more supportive of Poilievre, even in Toronto and the GTA, than older generations are. And that's a big change, but it's also an opportunity for us because for the reasons I've said, it is actually the provincial government that is responsible for the housing shortage. And there is a clear tale to be told here. So they are riding that tiger right now. And what we need to do is, I think there's an opportunity, if we want them to change course and back down on these sprawl policies, to push them off so the tiger can eat them and get them running. So I think that's really the central narrative and opportunity of this next election.
Great, thank you. Matthew, what about you? What issues do you think will be top of mind in the
Well,
upcoming?
I'm going to go in the opposite direction of Phil in a sense. If I were to list all the issues that ended up resonating with the public that came as a great shock to me, I'd be disqualifying myself as a political insider immediately. I mean, I think there are two things. I think we're as per my last question, I think we're at the beginning of a kind of extensive process of poking and prodding to find those issues, laying out these policies and musing about elections and then polling and looking at what's happening. And so I think we're in a process where the Ford government's trying to figure that one out right now. And I don't think they can figure it out immediately without knowing which way the Liberals are gonna jump. So the other thing is that campaigns always matter, and things pop up in campaigns, including people, character, and not necessarily issues. And we've seen that mainly in federal politics with Jack Layton in 2011, Justin Trudeau in 2015, et cetera, et cetera. So it may not even be an issue, but I do think, I will say this about housing, that it is a tremendous opportunity for us. And that notion that campaigns matter, that we're in the middle of this process where these guys are, the politicians, trying to figure this out. There's a great advantage to us on the line here tonight and the extended ALO group to try and get this on the agenda. And I really think that's what it's all about tonight. And I think there's opportunity with housing because of its kind of unique nature. It's important to everyone. It's why we recognized it as a human right, whether it's your retirement plan because you own a home, whether you're one of these young folks who's trying to figure out how to get a home or even pay rent, whether you're homeless. For everybody, housing is a critical issue. And then you have the added character about housing is the intersection with so many other issues. I've spoken about health. Jane, Phil have spoken about the environment and other issues, including agriculture, kind of almost interestingly. So I think part of the strategy has to be about us figuring out how to get housing on the agenda, given that kind of unique nature that it has as a policy issue.
Great. Jane, finally to you. What issues do you think will be top of mind in the upcoming provincial election and why?
Well, Franz, we talked about these questions quite a bit and we had them framed a little differently today. So we started with what are the issues going to be, and then what should they be? And I kind of looked at it that way because, with elections, there's a lot of messaging out there that shapes through the parties what the election is about, how they fire things off at us. And so, how is Ford, how are the Conservatives going to frame the election? The cornerstone has been get her done. Like, he gets stuff done. And but the truth is he's not getting stuff done. So how are they going to square that? I'm not too sure, but there will certainly be pushback on that get her done business. And housing as Phil says, like housing is the big deal that's on everybody's minds. But once again, it's like they're looking at providing housing for the upper end of the affordability scale. We should be talking about that lower end. It should be the most basic thing that we do. That, you know, it was Mike Harris who said, who downloaded social housing to the municipalities. And so we've had 25 years of not having that sort of, I guess, the financing that would come from income tax instead of from property tax. And the result is that our waiting times to get social housing have just grown and grown and grown. And right now in Halton alone, there's 7,000 waiting. I mean, it's a terrible number when we know that housing is so basic to getting people out of poverty for them to, it's about their health, it's about their ability to get a job. All of those things are essential. And if they're not happening, then we've got homelessness, which is terrible, or health outcomes that are costing us a lot, which is part of affordability then. And I also think the drive towards privatization of healthcare has got to be something that people are noticing. And it's bing, 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 bing. You're getting dinged for this and dinged for that. And I'm pretty sure that Ford will say, well, you know, we've been building hospitals, but they're not really looking after the employees of the hospitals. And so now there's that downloading or privatization at the same time that they're dropping income. There's huge amounts of money that are missing that can only result in less service. That's the way the equation works. So I think those things need to be talked about as well during the election.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the three of you for your answers. We've got two questions, which I'm going to suggest we get through really quickly. One of them I can answer. And then Phil, I think you've expressed interest in another one. Anne asks, will ALO endorse candidates who publicly advocate our policies in the election? We are nonpartisan because we are part of a charitable organization, so we cannot endorse particular candidates. However, we will be asking all political parties to endorse our actions. And in fact, we'll get to that as soon as we finish this section here. Bob asks, how can we engage small community rural voters, the conservative base, in supporting the ALO housing initiative? Phil, do you want to take a quick jab at that? And I mean a quick one because we got to move on.
I'm from a very small village of 400 people, and I make a point of talking to people who are radically different in politics. And I can say what works very well is simply, do you want your community turned into just another suburb of Toronto or not? Do you want your community swamped with would-be Torontonians who have been forced out by the Ford government's policies or not? And they don't want us there. So, frankly, the more conservative people are, the less they want a bunch of people who'd rather be in Toronto or even in Brampton living there. And frankly, I mean, that cuts very well. Keep rural Ontario rural.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience, for your questions. So let me now share my screen again. So an election may come in the spring. Phil, if I've understood correctly, thinks it will. Matthew's not quite so sure. And Jane is kind of sitting on the fence. My guess is it is. I suspect, as the panelists have suggested, housing and affordability will likely be a top of mind issue. although the premier is trying to change that with his focus on highway tunnels and bike lanes and building the unnecessary and destructive Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass. As I hope you have seen so far this evening, how we deal with the housing crisis will actually have a huge impact on a whole bunch of other important issues like healthcare, the environment, farmland protection, climate resilience, to name but a few. If people elect a government that implements the right housing solutions, we can actually simultaneously help solve the housing crisis and many of these other issues and build livable communities. However, if people elect a government that implements the wrong solutions, we're just going to make everything worse. Once the election is called, the Alliance for Livable Ontario will be severely restricted in what we can publicly say about housing and related issues. That's because of the Finance or Elections Act that very much restricts what organizations say around contentious issues without going through a whole bunch of hoops and hurdles, which means we have between now and a likely spring election to connect with as many Ontarians as possible. And we have a plan about what we want to do. And now I want to give you a sneak peek and then get your feedback to that plan. So the goals of the plan are very simple. We want to ensure voters know about the province's ruinous sprawl plans that harm the Greenbelt, farmland, and natural areas while only making the housing crisis worse. In other words, we want to speak the truth. And number two, we want to spread hope about how to make homes affordable in Ontario by promoting the 5 Ways Home actions, which we think will do exactly that. So we've come up with a 3-phase plan to do that. Phase 1 is shine a light on the government's ruinous sprawl, pro-sprawl agenda, like very deliberately shine a light on it. Phase 2 is show political parties the way to make homes affordable in Ontario. And phase 3 is to get our message to Ontarians before the election is called. So just to go in a bit of detail about phase 1, how are we going to shine a light on the government's ruinous sprawl agenda? We plan on releasing a media-friendly housing report card that evaluates key provincial housing actions like Bill 23, Bill 185, and shows how these actions have actually made things worse. We're hoping that's going to come in the end of October. Second action is we are going to release an expert analysis of the province's housing actions written by a reputable land use planner that provides lots of evidence about how provincial actions are doing nothing to solve the housing crisis. Phase 2, we're going to show political parties the way to make homes affordable in Ontario. We're going to take the report that we published in June, and we're going to, nip and tuck it a bit, take the recommendations that specifically deal with the province, and we're going to write a new a letter to the provincial party leaders and send it to them, asking them to endorse the recommendations that are in the 5 Ways Home report. That, fingers crossed, is going to happen sometime in early November. And then we're going to try to create an opportunity for party leaders to publicly endorse the 5 Ways Home recommendations. We'll see whether or not we can pull this off, but we're going to do our best to make that happen. The final phase is we want to get the message out to Ontarians before the election call. There are many different tools we can do that with. Probably the most powerful one we have with the Alliance for Livable Ontario is that ALO members collectively have a whole bunch of social media assets. And we're going to ask all of our member groups and all of you on this call to promote the report card, the reports, and the 5 Ways Home campaign. That's been going on now with the 5 Ways Home campaign for a couple of months. We want to ramp this up between now and spring of 2025. We also want to reach millions of Ontarians via social media ads promoting our report card and the solutions. We all know how powerful social media is, even though we may not like it. That's where people go to communicate with each other, and we want to make sure that we've got a presence. And so the way we do that, frankly, is by buying ads on social media. And then finally, we want to use our member groups. We have over 200 to reach their members. If you add up all of the members of all of our member groups, well, we're well over 100,000 people. And we want to have as many member groups as possible host an in-person or a video event like this, where we get to talk about our report cards and our ways forward and our 5 Ways Home campaigns. So what can you do? Four very simple things. First of all, invite the Alliance to speak to your group or network. Second is agree to use your social media channels, emails, however you want to do it to promote the reports in the 5 Ways Home campaign. Third is donate money to fund the 3-phase plan because it ain't going to be cheap, especially to buy social media ads. And the fourth, all encompassing, is help spread hope and the truth, because I can tell you from speaking to hundreds of people, pretty well close to 1,000 now in the last couple of months, people want to hear the truth. They want to have hope. Okay, before we get to that, we're just going to ask Ian now to get your feedback. And there's a poll up here now, and just ask you what are your thoughts about what's your gut response to this 3-phase plan, and secondly, are you interested in helping spread the Alliance message to your networks? And thirdly, would you be interested in having the Alliance come and speak to your group and or your friends? So, Ian, I'll leave it up to you again to keep the poll live as long as you think it needs to be.
Give it a little bit more long.
Right.
Yeah, it's jumping up pretty quickly. Just give it a
Okay.
few seconds.
Okay, I think we've got we've got great answers. We're going to stop. Can people see that? Can they see the results?
Yes.
Yeah. So great feedback. We've got 90% almost people either love it or like it. A lot of people are interested in helping spread the ALO message. That's wonderful. And would you be interested in having ALO come and speak to your group and or friends? We've got a lot of people who've said yes to that. That is amazing. We welcome your feedback on this plan. I'm desperately trying to get us finished by 8 o'clock. So if you do have comments about the plan, if you've got suggestions, whatever, please give us your feedback. I've asked Ian to put into the chat function the info@livableontario.ca email address. Just send your comments to us. I'd love to see that. Okay, now let us move on to the next piece. In a moment, I'm going to ask Ann Golden to say a few words, but before I do so, let me say a few words about Ann. Ann, of course, is one of the founders of the Alliance for Livable Ontario, and but this is just one of her latest contributions in a decade-spanning history of helping build a better province and country. Among her many, many accomplishments, she served as president of the United Way of Greater Toronto and president and CEO of the Conference Board of Canada. She is also a member of the Order of Canada, as well as a member of the Order of Ontario. Anne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Franz, and good evening, everyone. Fundraising is always challenging. Asking people to donate money is difficult, but it's especially so for non-capital projects that can't publicize the donor's name. These are more difficult. We're asked to ask people to give to administration or research or policy development or advocacy is difficult. And yet this money, these dollars are often the most important. You know, I studied history for 10 years. I thought I was going to be an historian, and I was for a few years, but I learned one thing. Things change when the climate of opinion changes. Now, public opinion can change public policy, and advocacy is what changes public opinion. To me, and I think this was expressed throughout the evening, the biggest obstacle that we face to ensuring that the towns and cities of Southern Ontario remain livable and sustainably so is that we are using sprawl to manage growth. Jane spoke to it, Phil spoke to it. Sprawl really is the enemy because without transit supportive density, simply put, the math doesn't work. But people don't get it. Proof positive that this doesn't work, I think, is the absurdity of the Premier's latest proposal with the tunnel from, I think it's Mississauga to Markham, which is nonsensical, fiscally irresponsible. But it shows the fact, the futility of relying on sprawl as our way to manage growth. And that is what we're trying to get people to understand. One of the links between housing and the reliance on sprawl is that housing now is being used as a political cover-up to a fig leaf to cover the sprawl agendas. We have to publicize this. It really, to me, is the most critical issue to save the quality of life we have here in Southern Ontario. So now I know that you all believe this because you're on this call. So I know the question in everyone's mind is, but how much should I give? And so I'm going to address that with the following story. I don't know if many of you know this story. It's a story of the hen and the hog that lived on a farm as it happened in Southern Ontario. And they were going for a walk, but on this particular day, they decided to go outside the farm into the village nearby. And as they entered the village nearby, they noticed that there were a lot of poor people, an encampment of people who needed help. And they were moved. And the hen said to the hog, "Look at all the people that need our help. There's poverty here. There's sadness here. We have to do something to help them." And the hog turned to the hen. These were unusual animals that they could talk. But the hog turned to the hen and said, "You're right, but what can we do?" And the hen said, "I'm thinking of a breakfast for everyone of bacon and eggs." The hog stopped for a moment and then said, "Well, that's okay for you. That's a contribution. For me, it's a total commitment." So when you're thinking tonight, how much should I donate for this vital work that we're doing? I'm going to ask you to think somewhere between a contribution and a total commitment. The number will differ for each of you depending on your circumstances. But the truth is, we need the money. Franz, I have to say, this program was fantastically planned, and the work that Franz is doing, in my view, is heroic. But he cannot publicize and do the work of education and advocacy without more funds. So that is my appeal to you. As you think tonight, what can I give? I'm going to turn it back to Franz to tell you how to give, whether by e-transfer or check or whatever. But I do want you to set your sights somewhere on that spectrum between just a contribution and a total commitment. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Franz. Franz, I think you're muted, Franz.
Yeah, there we are. Thank you, Anne, for your very kind comments. As you are considering how much to donate, I should make it clear that your donation is tax deductible. We are a project of the Small Change Fund, which is a registered charity, and we will issue you a tax receipt. We're hoping that you can make a donation or a pledge right now. To be honest, people are more likely to donate when they see others donating. So let me ask those of you who have decided to donate to use the chat function and tell us how much you are donating. Just input your name and the amount. We'll have a record of this and we'll be in contact with you. While you wait, there are multiple ways you can actually make a donation. The first is online. You can go to the livableontario.ca website and click the donation button at the top right, or you can go to the, and that will take you to the Small Change Fund website, or you can just click the link that I think Ian has popped into the chat function. Or you can send a check or an e-transfer. If you want to learn more about doing that, just email us at info@livableontario.ca. So let's see the chats. Let's see what sort of pledges we have
Franz,
seen.
I should have said that I would like to start this off. I know I have donated already, but I would like to donate an additional $1,000 tonight.
Oh my goodness. That's incredible. Kay Crane has committed to $50. Kevin writes, France and ALO team, I'd like to donate $100 tonight. And these amazing efforts, keep it up. Thank you, Kevin. Charlene is in for $50 tonight, more later. Thank you. Janine is in for $50. Claire is in for $50. Thank you. Noel is in for $500. Thank you. Alan is in for $100. This is incredible. Marilyn Freeman is in for $100. Janet is in for $100. Rosalind is in for $100. Jacqueline is in for $100. Bill is in for $100. And thank you for your $1,000. Karen is in for $300. Kim is in for $100. And Joanna is in for $100. Eleanor is in for $100. This is incredible. Thank you so much. And it keeps coming. Jane Fogel, thank you for $100 or $750. My apologies. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that, is in for $100. Rita is in for $100. This is amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. As I said, we will be in contact with you, or you can just go to the donate button at the end of this webinar, and you can do your donation online right away and probably get your charitable tax receipt. This is great. I am so grateful. We are all so grateful, because Alliance, of course, is not just, it's all of us. It's working together with our common vision. I'm just, I'm speechless. Thank you. Before we go, I want to say thank you again to our panelists, to Jane, Matthew, and Phil. And thank you to Anne for inspiring us all, and for your generous donation again. And thank you to Ian Borsick for helping run this Zoom webinar. Finally, I want to thank all of you for attending and for your incredible generosity. A recording of this webinar will be made available in the coming days. And if you want to speak to us, if you want us to speak to your group or network, please reach out to us at info@livableontario.ca. It has been an absolute pleasure this evening to be with all of you and working together to make a livable Ontario. Good evening, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Well done, France.